One of the biggest sources of confusion around the term branding, I believe, comes from the phrase touchpoints. See, branding has often been explained as this long-term commitment between you and your market, which is going to result from those thousands of interactions between a customer and the brand's touchpoints over time. But ever since the phrase touchpoints found its way into that explanation, branding has sort of devolved into this making sure all of your marketing and your sales materials look the same and they have the right logo and the right colors and the right fonts, right? It sort of became a design problem. But it's not a design problem. Branding is a behavioral question. When it's working, it just feels right. And that can only be achieved by being authentic in your brand. It's not about making a pretty logo or a clever tagline. It's about developing a brand character that will direct your company's actions and behaviors in such a way that you appeal to those who align with you. And in this episode, I'm going to explain why it works and why it's so important to stop asking design to influence your brand's ability to connect. This is the Simplogy Show with Bruce White, the podcast for business leaders and strategists to get the best practical advice on a deeper but more efficient approach to brand and business strategy right across a business's life cycle, because you can always add more value. Let's get into it. I had a really interesting call with a client recently, and we had one of those evolutionary conversations where you just kind of chase a metaphor all the way down the rabbit hole, right? So we were talking about branding, and this guy is a longtime client of mine, and he's a true believer in the results from branding because he's experienced them, right? So I don't need to convince him of the power of branding. But he's also taken our strategist training programs, and he's been having real trouble explaining it to his prospects because there's just so much misinformation out there from designers and marketers confusing branding with other disciplines. So we decided to just try and come up with a simple metaphor together that he could then use, and this is where that conversation took him, and his explanation of branding became for his prospects. Okay, I love these type of conversations. This is one of those ones where things just go naturally wherever they want to go. Like, it gets a little bit ridiculous, but at the same time, it makes its point through being a little bit ridiculous. So here's what we came up with. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a crowd and you're talking through a megaphone, right? Everyone in that crowd is going to hear you. That's how most people think that their advertising is going to work. Now, imagine standing in that same crowd, but without the megaphone. There are a lot fewer people who can hear your message, right? It's still pretty good. Those ones around you are going to hear you, especially if you're raising your voice, which is the way most marketers behave. It's still pretty good in that you can get that low-hanging fruit. But imagine that the whole crowd now has megaphones, and everyone's talking through a megaphone. Maybe one or two people near you will be able to hear you, but far, far fewer than before. Now imagine there's a stage at the edge of the crowd. Everyone's still got those megaphones, but there's also a band playing on the stage. How many people are going to hear you now? That's the closest comparison to what most people experience in today's advertising world. It is so noisy, it is so crowded, it is so busy that no one hears you, right? So how does branding help solve that problem? Well, imagine that you're in that crowd and you've got a broken arm. Everyone's jostling around and everyone's bumping into you and trying to make themselves heard, and you're in more and more pain every time someone bumps into you. And the next thing you hear is someone's voice, over a megaphone of course, offering bump protection services for broken arms. I did warn you, this gets ridiculous. It is a ridiculous analogy, but that's kind of why it works. Just imagine, you're in pain, you're stuck in this crowd with a broken arm, and someone starts offering protection against bumping for broken arms, right? Are you going to listen? Of course you are. Okay, now imagine there are two people with megaphones in this crowd, both offering bump protection services. The first one is just like you. They started offering these bump protection services because they had experienced having a broken arm in a crowd, and they saw how much pain it caused to be stuck in that crowd with a broken arm, right? They also share your beliefs that the people in the crowd should be more thoughtful, but they also agree that the broken arm is your responsibility. You hear what they're saying and you agree with their way of thinking, which then develops trust and credibility, and you also like the way they present their broken arm protection services through their tone and their personality, right? But there's also that other guy. So the other guy is offering broken arm protection services also, but he's offering them because he wants to make a buck. He's never had a broken arm in a crowd. He just saw a guy with a broken arm in a crowd, and he decided he could make some money off this guy. So he's offering a solution, but there's something that's just off, right? There's a disconnect. It's not necessarily that you don't like him. It's just that there's a disconnect in your mind about his service versus his motivations. Who are you going to trust more to protect your broken arm? So here's the real takeaway. If you're running around with a broken arm, if you're running around with a pain of some type, right? It could be a lack of sales, it could be crap clients, it could be bad staff, it could be not enough leads, it could be inconsistent revenue, whatever, right? A broken arm, a business version of a broken arm. If you're running around with a broken arm, you're going to be looking for someone who can help you with your broken arm, right? So the guy who's talking about protecting broken arms is going to get your attention. That's called advertising. But if you're running around with a broken arm and there are two people talking about protecting broken arms, or in all likelihood, hundreds of people talking about protecting broken arms or fixing them or getting more leads or increasing revenue or attracting better staff or whatever, right? Broken arm services. But you just click with one of those people. You believe they're credible, you trust them, you align with their way of thinking, you listen to what they're saying and you agree with their points of view, you share their opinions, you like their personality, and you feel like you would just get along and that working with this person would be rewarding and enjoyable. Well, that person's not going to just get, they're going to keep your attention. And that's called branding. And when it's done right, there is typically not a standout aspect of the person or the brand that you're attracted to that says, I like their product, or I like their personality, or I like their value system, right? It's just that it feels right. When it's working, it just feels right. And that can only be achieved, like I said, by being totally authentic in your brand. Again, it's nothing to do with a pretty logo or a clever tagline. It's about really focusing on developing that brand character that's going to direct your company's actions and behaviors in such a way that you are appealing naturally to those who align with you, okay? That's why the other guy feels off. It's inauthentic. He might be saying the right things, but there's something that's just off about him. So even though you're going to put a whole lot of effort into developing all of those things I mentioned, personality, character, tone, values, vocabulary, perceptions, differentiation, positioning, everything that goes into a brand, right? Even though you're going to put a lot of effort into developing those, most of those things aren't going to go on your masthead or the hero image of your website or even your about page, right? They make up who your brand is and the way that you behave and the way that you act. And it's that behavior and it's those actions that are going to create the connections with your like-minded audience. So your brand doesn't need to go and find people with broken arms, right? That's a marketing question. But developing your brand has to uncover which type of broken arms you can fix, how you can fix them, what makes your fix different and better than others, and who has that specific type of broken arm problem, okay? Which is why so much marketing out there is so hit and miss. It's like this spray and pray activity because this step hasn't been completed before they've started spraying and praying, okay? So then you're just running around talking to everyone with a broken arm. But the guy who needs you to keep the crowd back from his broken arm while it is mending is a very different conversation to the one you would have with the guy who needs his arm set in a cast, right? So you have to understand exactly who you help, how you help them, and then communicate why you're different through those behaviors and actions, okay? And of course, that is all developed by developing your brand. So that's it for this one. I hope that helps for any of you that are still trying to decide whether you need to focus your energy on branding. I just wanted to share that little commentary on why it's really important to not believe the hype, to not follow any of the big promises from design and marketing. It's not branding. It's certainly not brand strategy. there is this step you need to do first. And I just wanted to make sure I made that very clear for those of you who are exploring this, to make sure that you don't get led down the wrong track. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a great day. Bye for now. This is The Simplogy Show with Bruce White, the podcast for business leaders and strategists to get the best practical advice on a deeper but more efficient approach to brand and business strategy right across a business's life cycle, because you can always add more value.